I'd like to go over 2 more strategies that we've been working on for the last week or so. We're going to continue to work on them for another 2 weeks, and then we're going to have our Unit 2 exam. So the first strategy is addition with regrouping. And there are some things that I'm going over with the students just to get them to try to remember the strategy in order. Number 1 is to understand what they're trying to do. Typically, these problems come with a word problem, so they're trying to read and understand the word problem and just get a grasp of the size of the number and how they're working with that number. And that's kind of why we did a lot of the place value earlier, so that they can understand what the number means to them. And then number 2, we want to make sure that they stack the number exactly appropriately on top of each other. So the ones place has to be on top of the ones place, the tens on top of the tens, the hundreds on top of the hundreds. If they have a 3-digit number and a 2-digit number, they need to make sure that they stack the ones on top of the ones and the tens on top of the tens. A very common mistake is for them to move those numbers over, and then of course the problem is just wrong, and it's not because they solved it incorrectly, it's because they just stacked them incorrectly. So that's number 2 in our strategy. And then to solve very carefully, making sure that they use the strategy that I have shown them. So when they solve an addition with regrouping, the expectation is that they start from the right, which is the opposite way that they would read. So they would start from this side and go this way. First, they would do 7 plus 5, which is 12. And because 12 has 2 digits and you can only put 1 digit here, you put the 2 and they carry the 1 to the tens place. They need to stack it exactly above the neighbor of the ones place. And then they add the next stack. 8 plus 5 is 13, plus 1 is 14. Because that is 2 digits, they put the 4 under the tens place and carry the 1 exactly over its neighbor, which is the hundreds place. And 3 plus 3 plus 1 equals 7. So their answer would be 742. So that's addition with regrouping. They are getting a good basic understanding of that, but it's always great to review. And I'm going to show you the strategy for subtraction with regrouping, which I use the same 3 strategies for them to understand what they're working on, and then the regrouping is just slightly different. So I want them to understand the problem. They need to understand that the smaller number has to be on the bottom of a subtraction problem because they can't subtract the bigger number from the smaller number. So they have to understand the values of the numbers and which one is greater and less. So 287 must be smaller than 423 or the problem won't work. They have to have them stacked appropriately again and then solve carefully. So 3 minus 7, because what we call more on the floor, this is the floor, because there's more on the floor here, we have to go next door. And we go next door to the 2 and we borrow 1. So if we borrow 1 from the 2 becomes a 1, and we take that 1 and we just very carefully squeeze it in there and make that a 13. And 13 minus 7 equals 6. 1 take away 8, we can't do that because again there is more on the floor, so we need to go next door. We cross off our 4 and borrow 1. The 4 becomes a 3, and we take that 1 that we borrowed and we squeeze it next to the 1 over in the tens place, making sure that they have crossed this out so that they don't accidentally put it in front of the 2. So now we have 11 minus 8 is 3, and 3 minus 2 is 1, and their answer is 136. I have been really stressing the fact that they need to be sure that they cross that number out, so they are no longer using that number anymore, or any of the numbers that they cross out, and they can visibly see the new numbers that they're using. So we're working really hard on the neatness of stacking, understanding the problem that they read, because typically it is a word problem, and then really carefully solving so that they are understanding how to use the strategy and making sure that they do their addition and subtraction correctly. So when they come home with homework this week and next week, you can share the video with them and take some time to work on those strategies. Thank you.